I didn't expect to see her at the hardware store. Not on a Tuesday afternoon, anyway. That place was usually just me, some retired guy comparing paint swatches for half an hour, and a few students grabbing duct tape before heading back to campus. She was standing in the aisle with the extension cords, her hair tied back like she hadn't planned to be seen. And maybe that's why I kept looking. There was something unguarded about her, something that didn't match how I'd usually known her, polished, put together, always the one who asked me how my classes were going when I came by to see her son. She glanced up and caught me staring. "Oh. You," she said, almost surprised, then laughed softly as if to soften it. "You're handy, right? Or at least, more handy than me." I shrugged, shifting the box of nails I'd come in for. "Depends on the day." The corner of her mouth lifted. She held up a pack of wall anchors. "Think these will hold a bookshelf, or am I about to ruin my drywall?" It should have been nothing, just a question. But I noticed the way her hand hovered longer than it had to, like she was waiting for me to really look. I did. At her hand, at the faint smudge of pencil near her knuckle, at the ring finger that was bare now. I pretended not to notice that part. We talked for another minute. Something about drill bits, something about me over-explaining. She teased me for sounding like an instruction manual. I pretended to take offense. It was easy, like there was more air in the aisle when she was there. I thought that was it. Just a coincidence, a run-in to replay later when I was lying awake, phone screen lighting up the dark for no reason. But then, as I turned to leave, she said it. "You know. I could use an extra pair of hands this weekend. I'm moving some things around the house. Just a few shelves, boxes, nothing heavy." Her voice trailed, like she wasn't sure if she'd already said too much. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, of course. Just tell me when." She smiled, not wide, just enough to crease her cheek. "Saturday, then. Afternoon." I don't know why I agreed so fast. Maybe it was the way she didn't quite meet my eyes when she asked. Or the way her shoulders straightened after I said yes, like some small weight had been lifted. On the walk back to my apartment, I kept replaying it, the way her voice dipped when she said, "moving some things." It wasn't the words that caught me. It was the pause, the hesitation. Like she wasn't talking about furniture at all. That night, I scrolled through my messages and almost typed something to her son. A casual, "Hey, your mom's good," or some excuse to see if he'd mentioned her needing help. I didn't send it. Instead, I stared at the blank text box until the screen dimmed. The next morning, I found myself folding the same receipt in my pocket over and over while waiting for coffee. I thought about her hands on the wall anchors. I thought about the space between her words. By Friday, I'd convinced myself it was nothing, just shelves, just boxes, just me overthinking. But then, late that night, my phone buzzed with her name. "Saturday still good," she wrote. Then, after a pause, "Come by around 3. Back door." I read it 3 times before replying. And even after I sent "sure," I couldn't stop wondering why the back door. She left the back door unlocked, like she'd been expecting me. Her house smelled faintly of cedar and laundry detergent, lived in, but not messy. A few boxes were stacked by the wall, and an old bookshelf leaned half-assembled in the corner of the living room. She came out from the kitchen, brushing dust off her hands. "You're right on time," she said. I laughed nervously. I try to be reliable. Not always my strongest trait. She tilted her head, as if filing that away. "Reliability's rare," she murmured, almost to herself. We started with the bookshelf. I steadied it while she held the screws, our shoulders nearly touching. She made some comment about how instructions never made sense, and I teased that maybe she was holding the diagram upside down. Her laugh was quiet but it lingered, and for a second, I wanted to hear it again just to see if it sounded the same. Halfway through, she paused and leaned against the wall. I used to be good at this sort of thing. When my husband and I first moved here, I built most of the furniture myself. He wasn't much for tools. She smiled faintly, though her eyes didn't. Guess you don't realize how much you take on alone until there's no one else to hand you the wrench. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, tightening the last screw in silence. I wanted to ask about him, about when he'd left, but it felt too direct. Too much like prying. Instead, I said, "Looks sturdy now. Better than anything I've ever built." That earned me a softer smile. One that felt like it landed closer to her. We moved the shelf into place, then sat down for tea she'd brewed without asking. The mugs were mismatched, and she slid one toward me, careful not to touch my hand, though her eyes lingered. Her son's photo sat on the mantel, him, younger, in a soccer uniform, hair messy from the wind. The sight twisted something in me. I remembered standing next to him at practice once, handing him water bottles, never thinking about the woman who'd be sitting across from me years later. I caught myself staring and shifted. He was good at soccer, I said. He quit after high school. She wrapped her hands around her mug. Sometimes I wonder if I pushed him too hard. Or maybe not enough. The quiet stretched out, filled only by the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I thought about telling her I understood, that I'd always felt like I was letting my parents down in different ways, but the words stayed stuck. When she finally stood to clear the cups, her hand brushed my shoulder in passing. Light, almost nothing. But I felt it more than the steam of the tea or the scrape of the chair. "Thanks for coming," she said, voice casual, eyes not. And even as she moved away, I knew that touch had meant something neither of us wanted to name. Saturday stretched longer than it should have. By the time I walked back through her gate, I'd already convinced myself to keep things normal. Just shelves, just boxes. Nothing else. She met me at the door with a smile that felt too practiced. Her hair was still damp, like she'd rushed from a shower. "I thought you weren't coming," she said, though I was only a few minutes later than 3. "Traffic," I lied. We worked side by side again, this time moving a dresser from one wall to another. The scrape of wood against the floor filled the silence. Our hands met briefly on the edge of the drawer, hers pulling, mine steadying. She pulled back too fast, like even that was too much. "Careful," I said. "I am careful," she answered, but her voice was sharper than she meant. She exhaled slowly. "Sorry. Just, tired." We sat afterward, her pouring us both water. She tucked one leg beneath her on the couch, casual, but her eyes flicked toward the window like someone might be watching. "Your son called me last night," I said before I could stop myself. "Asked if I'd been around lately." Her head snapped toward me. "What did you say?" "Nothing. Just, that I saw you at the store." Relief crossed her face, then something else, guilt, maybe. "He worries too much. Thinks I shouldn't." "I don't know." She trailed off, staring into her glass. "Doesn't matter." But it did. I could feel it between us, humming louder than the refrigerator in the kitchen. I wanted to tell her it was fine. That we were fine. Instead, I folded and refolded the hem of my sleeve, watching her fingers trace the rim of her glass. She broke the silence with a memory. When he was little, he'd drag every blanket in the house to the living room. Said he was building a fortress to keep the bad dreams out. I'd lie there with him sometimes, under all that weight. Too warm, couldn't breathe. But I stayed anyway. Her eyes found mine, holding just a second too long. I swallowed. "Sounds safe. Too safe, maybe." Her voice was low, careful. The air shifted. Heavier now, like if I moved too quickly something fragile would snap. Then, the sound of footsteps outside. A neighbor's laugh, too close to the porch. We both froze, glancing toward the door. She shifted back, straightening her spine as if distance could erase the moment. "Should probably get that dresser settled," she said quickly, already on her feet. I stood too, slower. My chest still tight with what almost slipped out. When I passed her in the narrow hallway, our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. She looked at me then, not long, just enough. Eyes steady, lips parted like there was something she almost said. For a second, the space between us thinned. Almost nothing. Then she turned, breaking it. And I was left staring at the back of her, knowing we'd nearly crossed something we couldn't take back. By the fourth time I came over, it wasn't about shelves or boxes anymore. She said she needed help carrying something from the garage, but when I got there, it was already done. She just smiled lightly and said, "Since you're here, maybe we can have some air." We walked to the park 2 blocks away. Early evening, the sky dimming into that pale lavender shade that makes everything look softer. She kept her hands in her jacket pockets, and I kept mine swinging uselessly at my sides. We sat on a bench, a little too close for casual, a little too far for what I wanted. She sighed, not dramatically, just the kind that comes from somewhere deep, like she'd been holding her breath all week. "I don't know why I keep asking you over," she said, eyes fixed on the path ahead where a jogger passed. "It's not the shelves, obviously." I felt my stomach twist. "I don't mind. I like being here." That made her look at me. "Really look." "You shouldn't," she said softly. The words hung there, colder than the air. I wanted to argue, but she shook her head before I could. "You're too young." "And I'm not." She gave a small laugh, but it broke halfway. "And you're his friend." That part, she stopped. "That part's the worst of it." I didn't know what to do with my hands. I clenched them, then rested them on my knees. "I don't think it's the worst of it," I said finally. Her lips parted like she had an answer, but none came. We sat in silence, watching a stray dog sniff around the trash bin, the kind of ordinary moment that made everything else feel unbearable. After a while, she spoke again, quieter. "Do you ever wonder if you're filling the wrong spaces? Replacing things you're not supposed to replace?" I thought of the nights I'd wanted to text her, the way I noticed her hand brushing mine when she passed me a glass. "All the time," I said. Her shoulders sank, relief and ache tangled together. "I don't want this," she whispered. I stared at the fading light on her face, at the lines around her eyes, at how human she looked when she stopped pretending to be composed. And before I could stop myself, the word slipped, "But you do." She didn't answer. Just let out a breath that clouded in the cooling air. She looked at me then, straight on, no flicker, no retreat. Her hand shifted in her pocket, like she almost pulled it free, almost reached for mine. But then, somewhere in the distance, a car horn snapped the air. A reminder of everything outside the bench, outside us. She blinked, turned away, and stood up slowly. "We should head back." And I followed, heart heavy with the almost that had just passed between us. The next week, she didn't call. I waited, told myself she was busy, that shelf stayed upright, that she didn't need me. But by Thursday, the silence felt intentional. I scrolled past her name in my phone more times than I could count, thumb hovering over the screen, not pressing down. When I finally did hear from her, it wasn't her voice. It was her son. He'd texted late one night, out of nowhere, "You been around my mom's place lately?" I stared at the words until the screen dimmed, until my reflection stared back. I typed, "Not really," and hit send before I thought better of it. He didn't reply. The next afternoon, I walked past her house anyway. No reason, just habit. Curtains half drawn, no movement inside. I almost knocked. Almost. But something about the quiet told me not to. When she finally reached out, it was a short message, "Sorry I've been, things got complicated. Hope you're well." I wanted to ask what complicated meant. Instead, I read it 3 times, then set the phone face down on the table. Days passed. I filled the silence with small things, late walks, cold coffee, background noise on the TV I didn't really watch. But her absence followed me around, clinging to the corners. When I did see her again, it wasn't planned. I was at the grocery store, staring at a row of cereal boxes like I had all the time in the world, when she turned into the aisle. She froze for half a beat before smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," she said, too casual. "Didn't expect to run into you." "Yeah," I said, hands stuffed into my pockets. "Me neither." We stood there, strangers pretending not to be. I noticed she looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. Or maybe I just wanted to think she missed me too. She cleared her throat. "I've had my ex around this week. Sorting some things out. That's why I've been distant." The word hung heavier than it should have. Distant. I nodded like it was fine. Like it didn't sink into me. Makes sense. But she looked at me, really looked, as if checking whether I believed her. Or whether I'd stay, even now. We parted quickly, her cart rolling away, me pretending to keep browsing. I didn't. I left without buying anything. Back at home, I sat on the edge of my bed and started typing a message. "Do you want me to stop coming by?" Then I erased it. Typed again, "Do you want me there?" Erased that too. The cursor blinked at me, patient and unyielding. In the end, I left it blank. Phone dark, message unsent. And the silence stretched longer. It was raining when I went back. Not a storm, just the kind of steady rain that made everything smell like wet leaves and earth. I didn't plan to go. My feet carried me there anyway. She answered the door barefoot, sweater sleeves pulled down over her hands. For a second, she just stared at me, like she was deciding whether to let me in. Then she stepped back. "You'll get soaked," she said softly. Inside, the house was dim. A single lamp on, the rest shadows. She moved toward the kitchen without asking if I wanted tea, but the kettle was already on the stove, whistling faintly. Habit. Muscle memory. We sat at the table, steam rising between us. She looked tired, but softer too, like she'd stopped trying to keep her guard up. "I wasn't going to call you again," she said finally, eyes fixed on her mug. I swallowed. "I know. It's not fair. To you. To him. To me, even." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "I keep telling myself to stop. And then her voice trailed. She shook her head. Then you're here." I didn't know what to do with my hands. I clasped them, unclasped them, set them flat on the table. I didn't come to make it harder. Her eyes lifted to mine. Quiet. Searching. "But you did." The word sat between us, heavier than the rain. I almost apologized. Instead, I said, "I think about you. More than I should." Her breath caught. A small thing, but I saw it. She leaned back, pressing her palms around the mug like it was keeping her steady. "Don't say that," she whispered. "But it's true." She closed her eyes. "And if I say I think about you too? Then what?" The room felt smaller, the rain louder. I pictured her son's photo on the mantel, the look he'd give me if he knew. I pictured myself walking away and never coming back. Both futures hurt. "Then at least it's honest," I said finally. Silence stretched again, but it wasn't the same kind as before. This one pulsed with something alive, uncontainable. She reached across the table, hesitated, then let her hand rest close enough that I could feel its warmth. Not touching, just near. Her eyes held mine, steady now. "We can't." "Not really. You know that." I nodded. My throat tight. "I know. But I turned my palm up anyway, close enough that if she wanted to, she could bridge the last inch. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, like it cost her something, her fingers slid into mine. A quiet connection. Not a promise, not forever, just now. She let out a breath, almost a laugh, almost a sob. "Okay," she whispered. And I whispered back, "Okay." Time didn't break anything. It softened the edges. Weeks passed, then months, and somehow the silence between us stopped feeling dangerous. We didn't meet in secret or trade messages at odd hours anymore. Instead, I found myself knocking on her door on a Sunday morning, carrying coffee in a cardboard tray. She'd open it barefoot, sweater sleeves long as ever, and the world would feel steadier than it used to. Her son had moved out for good, chasing work in another city. I saw him once before he left. He clapped me on the back, called me reliable, and told me to keep mom company. He didn't mean it the way it landed, but I carried the words like permission anyway. We built a rhythm that didn't need naming. I fixed small things around the house, loose handles, dripping faucets, squeaking hinges. She pretended the kettle didn't whistle every afternoon at 3:15, though it always did. Sometimes we walked to the park again, sitting on the same bench where we'd once let silence nearly undo us. The first time she reached for my hand in daylight, neither of us made it a big thing. She just slipped her fingers through mine while the street hummed with cars, and I didn't even look over. I only squeezed lightly, like we'd always done this. It wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary. And maybe that's what made it feel real. I still thought about the line we'd almost crossed, how close we'd come to letting fear win. How easy it would have been to stay in that place, trapped between wanting and guilt. But sitting with her now, tea cooling in our mismatched mugs, I realized something: we hadn't chosen a moment. We'd chosen the days after. The morning routines. The quiet. One evening, as rain pressed soft against the windows, she said it without ceremony. "You know, I don't worry about replacing anything anymore." I looked at her, unsure. She smiled, faint but certain. "You're not replacing. You're just here." I didn't answer right away. Just let the warmth of her words settle into me. I thought about all the benches, the silences, the unsent messages, the unsaid truths. How everything had led here, to this kitchen table, this tea, this ordinary night that felt extraordinary because she was across from me. I reached across, touching her hand the way I had once been too afraid to. Her fingers curled into mine, steady. No hesitation now. "Here," I echoed quietly. The clock ticked. The kettle whistled. The rain kept falling. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to wonder what came next. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?